Osato, and welcome to the Gutterblood Talk Show. Thank you for being here. It's really great to see your faces. I do have a few things to mention. First of all, tonight's the first night where I actually have an AV tech team, which blows me. And they're volunteering. They're doing it because they care about the show and they care about what's happening, and I really love them and I'm really grateful. So we've got Christo Papakias over here. We've got Dioniso. Okay, am I going to screw this up? Dionisio. Did I screw that up? Dionisio.
Pretty close. There you
Pretty
go.
close. Dionisio. Traversal.
That's me.
Okay, cool. And we also have Ethan Tinsley, who is our intern from UT. And I'm like, and he's fabulous. We also have Leah over here, who's volunteered her time to be on this channel. And then we have Rita up there, who has been with me forever. This started out as an exhibition series where I gave this wall to an artist and threw a party. When I moved to Austin, I didn't know a soul, so I said I'm just going to throw parties. I started with the two people I knew, and it's turned into this. But Rita has been with me from the very beginning, helping me with both the exhibition series, and then when this started up, she's always here, and I couldn't really do it without her. So I'm going to sit down since we're tracking and get this started. Just to do some very brief introductions, and then we're going to start to roll. We have Mikaela Andres over here. She's a former Texas classroom teacher and current programs director at MINDPOP in affiliation with the Creative Learning Initiative in the Independent School District of Austin. I also have to mention, while I'm getting a little warmed up, is that I'm just really honored to have you guys here. You know, that everybody agreed to do this, and because also our speakers volunteer. They volunteer their time. So we need to acknowledge that as well. And I'm really, really, really happy and grateful that you guys are here.
Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. And then we have Yulia Lanina. This is I love this. Assistant Professor of Practice, Department of Arts and Entertainment Technologies, School of Design and Creative Technologies, College of Fine Arts at the University of Texas, UT. She's also a really wonderful artist, a very beloved Austin artist. And then last but not least, we have Sarah Chestnut, educator, researcher, and senior manager of learning and interpretation at the Contemporary Austin, overseeing all K through 12 and educator programs, including Seeing Special Things, which is extraordinary. I printed out a few things to put up there if any of you want to grab it. When we go out, we're going to talk about that more. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. The other thing I wanted to mention before we launch is that we only have 3 chairs for guests, and the reason why is because we only have like an hour, give or take. And in order to maintain a flow and in-depth conversation where people really get to know each other, it's really difficult to do with 10 people. It does not forego all the people that we could have on any given subject. And if I can keep this going, I would actually like to take some of our subjects and run them through again and keep bringing more people in. Given that, I need to do a shout out that there are a lot of people on the ground in Austin and have been for a really long time doing amazing work, and I want to shout them out, and this is just a partial list. I'm sure I've forgotten a few people. You know, I'm a newbie. I've only been here for 6 years, so there's a lot of stuff I don't know. But anyway, here it is. The Art School of Laguna Gloria, and they are in affiliation with the Contemporary Austin. They're their sister campus, and they have a really, really beautiful studio set up. They have a scholarship program. They do all kinds of stuff. Mexicarte Education Department, which is also absolutely fantastic. They develop curriculum for teachers. They're very, very active, hands-on. And of course, the Art Gallery for Black Studies and the George Washington Carver Museum at UT, which are exemplary and absolutely fantastic, and the Doherty Art School. They do really great work as well. The other thing is, this is not a binary between the panel and the audience or the line in between. It is participatory, so
feel free to pipe up if something sparks and you want to bring it up. But give us a beat, because I need to go in more depth with these guys to talk more about what they do to warm up, and then we can bring it in. 2 more things. I wanted to give you a little bit about the backstory of why this talk came into being. It's all Julia's fault. No, she started it. She came to a show that we did prior, and actually Jill Schroeder, who's with us tonight, she was the guest moderator. And we were talking about the vigorous work that's done here in Austin, keeping talent here, and the collector culture, which is a little soft. It's getting a lot better. And Julia raised the question of, how do we overcome intimidation? How do we get kids to go into galleries and museums and feel comfortable and do it voluntarily? And Chris Tomlinson, who was one of our panelists that night, his comment was that we don't raise our kids in Texas to love and appreciate art. They have to be invited, or it has to be a curricular requirement. And I'm quoting this, and Julia said, I'm working on it. And my mind went, bing! That would make a really fantastic show. So, and I'm really glad to have you. Now this morning, also, me and Mikaela had an exchange that was really great because, again, my own ignorance, I don't know what STEM is. So I'm like, what's STEM? And she goes, it's science, technology, and engineering. And I'm also quoting you because essentially you and Chris are kind of lined up in different ways of what you're saying. There has been a binary track to education so far where things usually fall under STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, or humanities, reading, language, arts, social studies, and history. I have most of my experience in STEM-based learning with art integrated into it, which is a whole other thing to talk about. My mom was an activist in the 60s about, this needs to be there. She was showing me research papers about, they were taking capsule kids that had art in their curriculum with kids that did not, and the kids who had art in their curriculum characteristically outperformed in STEM. This was being done in the 60s and 70s. Anyway, but most places focus on the four core contents and leave art out, which is kind of what Chris was mentioning. So I have sort of a general starter, and then we're going to go down with you guys. And this also relates to what I was just talking about. What are the challenges that are specific to Austin, and what is the groundwork being done? Let's start with you, Sarah. I wanted to ask, also I've been reading everybody's resumes, and we have some real badass women up here. I wanted to kind of just have you fill in a little bit more from your brief introduction. Why she does why you do what you do, how you got started, highlights from your programming, which is phenomenal, how you work with teachers and develop curriculum, and seeing special things, which is very extraordinary, where you actually walk kids through layered experiences of, they visit the museum, then they go to the school, then they do projects, then they come back. And then they gift the kids, a lifelong membership and their families to come to the museum. So in terms of really inviting people in, that's pretty amazing, and your reach. And I thought I'd just let you riff on that for a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to do so, and thanks for providing this platform for that. Yeah, so I started at the Contemporary in a full-time position with the education department in 2021. Mm-hmm. So I've only been working with the Seeing Special Things program for a few years in that capacity. Mm-hmm. And I say only a few years because it's been going for 40 years. It's been running for, wow. This is its 45th year that the program's been running here in Austin with the AISD schools. So yeah, I have a background in art education. I have my master's from UT that I got in 2020, and that had a focus on museum studies. I was able to do some, get some work experience at different museums in the city, and then this position for school and teacher programs manager opened up, and that was also managing the Seeing Special Things program. So we call it our flagship program. Again, it's been going for 45 years, but we do lots of K-12 tours and programming and things. But specifically for Seeing Special Things, one of the things that's special about it is that it is a multi-visit program. Right. So a lot of tours, you think about coming to the museum, you get excited, you come one time during your school year and you go home. I'm already losing pieces here. And what's unique about this program is it's for elementary students, typically Title I, and they will see us up to 7 times during the school year. So we're really forming strong relationships with those students by the end of the year. Typically, we will go to visit them in their classrooms 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring, and they will come visit us at our museums as well. We have 2 museum locations as well, so that adds a unique aspect to it. They get to see our sculpture park, Laguna Gloria, usually in the fall. Then they'll go visit our downtown Jones Center location, which has rotating contemporary art in a gallery setting. They'll see that typically in the winter. And then in the spring, we usually do a big blowout full day. They get to come back to the Jones Center, see a new exhibition in the same space, and then they'll go back to Laguna Gloria in the afternoon and have a picnic and a celebration, and that's when we give them that pass to come back for free with their family members for as long as they want to. And every time we see them, both in the classroom and at the museum, we try to keep a 50-50 split relatively of art making and art looking. Right. So they'll get a tour where we're talking and looking at the art on display, and then they're also in an art lab where they are contemporary artists themselves. Sometimes we even get to bring in professional artists from the Austin community to run those art labs with them. So. Yeah, it's a very special program that is much more resource intensive than our one-off field trips as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about developing curriculum? Because you also work with teachers, which is this is something I've seen shared in several models where you are actually going into schools, rolling up your sleeves and helping them put stuff together. You do that as well because you have a background in that in your education. You got your BA in art history, right?
And then, communications with a concentration in art history. Mm-hmm.
Right, and then your MA is in building curriculum and
art education.
Art education.
Yeah.
Specifically working with museums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how you develop curriculum with teachers?
Sure. Yeah. So thinking about contemporary art is also different than thinking about, say, like a standard canon of teaching, especially Western art history or, an AP course of the 200 works you need to know. So that in itself is a fun challenge to be creatively limited by what is on display at both of our locations. Mm-hmm. It's a nice mix of some of the more evergreen sculptures that we have at our sculpture park that are there for a longer duration, and then we have works that are coming in our gallery space a few times a year. It's changing over. So that requires us to do a lot more like on the grounds curriculum writing than say maybe a typical encyclopedic museum where there are exhibitions coming in frequently, but there's also like that stalwart collection that you can turn back to every time. We don't necessarily have that, especially if we're working off the Jones Center. So it's really challenging us to be on our toes, on our feet, thinking about curriculum all the time in that way. And then also contemporary art comes with its own challenges. Especially for public school teachers in the state of Texas, making sure that we're towing that line between, not censoring what we are showing, not censoring the artists, and also being aware of the limitations that the teachers might have as they're thinking about, what's appropriate for students and the, variety of opinions that are out there about the contemporary art that might be on display, and how can we do that safely and responsibly with all age ranges. So yeah. It's a challenge.
That's a great thing to bring up. And another question I wanted to ask you, I have all my questions lined out here, was what got you into this? Like, what do you love about it? Like, why did you decide to jump in and do this kind of work, which is really vigorous?
Yeah, so before I went back to school, I was a classroom teacher abroad, actually, and and doing research and things, and I taught a lot of humanities and art appreciation courses, and I really enjoyed working in the classroom, but I also enjoyed taking students out of the classroom and going to museums and going on field trips, and there was just something about that object, the physicality of it, and teaching from a physical thing that a human has made versus the facsimile that's on the screen. And I was just really astounded by the differences and nuances of that teaching style, and so decided I would go see what it's all about and try out museum teaching.
And here you are.
And here I am. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So let's move on to you, Mikaela. It's sort of a similar question of to give us a little bit more in terms of the specifics and mission of MINDPOP and their interrelationship of MINDPOP and the Creative Learning Initiative, their interrelationship. I also learned about you when I went on the Contemporary site and went down the rabbit hole, and that's how I found you. Because I was like, when I was doing, and Yulia and I would go for walks and, we'd talk, and I'm like, I really want people who are in public schools, who are working with kids that are not privileged, and are really on the ground. And like, but where are they? I didn't, I had no idea where to start. So I just started going, and that's how I found you. And it's really extraordinary. And then, so also like how it dovetails with the contemporary program. You guys know each other, you're friends, and then like narratives about the longevity. We discussed this because the three of us got together. We were going to go out for dim sum. And then one of us didn't feel so hot. So we did it, we did a Zoom call. But Yulia brought up a really, great question about, the longevity, like how you track kids, specifics about how it works, and also your extraordinary team. There's a huge team that you, also reading her resume, she was like voted the best teacher of the year, like 2 times in a year. You met, yeah, it's true. And she also manages huge teams. She's like, get it done. It was one of the first things I noticed about you. She's like, and you work with an extraordinary team like Brent and, few of the folks who are here. Jackson's here. Mm-hmm. So, let's just launch into it. Like, tell us a little more about MINDPOP and the Creative Learning Initiative.
Yeah. So MINDPOP was created because back in 2011, a group of funders, they were kind of seeing that across Austin, there were huge inequities around arts instruction, and they wanted to know what they could do to kind of mitigate that. So as you mentioned, Brent Hasty is the executive director of MINDPOP, and he, in conjunction with that group of funders, and also Maria Karstarfin, who used to be, or is a former AISD superintendent, they kind of got together and started to develop this idea of a community-wide impact initiative, which we now call the Creative Learning Initiative. And the reasoning behind that is because we were seeing that in rural areas, which I know this came up in the last conversation that kind of spearheaded this. In rural areas, students they had far fewer exposure and opportunities to arts-based education. And in suburban areas, we have schools that actually are able to provide 70% more like specialized fine arts classes than students are able to get in rural areas. And that's because students who are identified as needing remediation or tutoring, they actually have to give up their specials or electives, their music class and their art class, to be able to get that extra time in whatever core content it is that they are identified as being a struggling learner in. And so we wanted to be able to ensure that all students, including students who would have to lose out on specials minutes, were able to get that art-based learning in their core classrooms. So we train teachers in creative teaching strategies, which is just a instructional technique that enhances what teachers already do every day in the classroom. But we're able to, excuse me, we're able to teach math, science, reading, and social studies through music and dance and art and theater. And we're providing safe spaces where kids get to bring their actual lived experiences into the classrooms, and that makes learning a little more sticky for them.
Yeah.
And they're able to transfer it from the setting of the classroom to the real world and the rest of their life.
Yeah, apply it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So what got you started? What started your passion for teaching and getting involved and getting in the ring?
Yes. So I was in the realm of public education for a decade. I got into teaching because I really wanted to provide opportunities to students that looked like me, to have these experiences that I maybe didn't get to experience myself as a student, but that I know deeply impact not only your ability to learn, but just your ability to be a good human.
Right.
And so I got into teaching. I taught 5th grade for 5 years. 5th grade is it's a very special grade.
Yeah.
10-year-olds are awesome. But yeah, I kind of realized that I had a knack for kind of integrating creativity into science. So I jumped up to middle school and I taught 8th grade science. And then I really noticed that I had a heart for public education teachers. Nothing against kids. I love kids. Everything we do and everything teachers do is because of the kids. And sometimes the teachers are the ones that are kind of overlooked when it comes to providing what is actually needed to be able to get rich learning in classrooms. So I became an instructional coach and an AP, and I have kind of turned my path to working with teachers, developing curriculum and professional learning that kind of just equips them to be able to integrate arts learning into their classrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
mainly I just wanted to make sure all kids, no matter where they were, what they looked like, or where they came from, get what they deserve.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a real true intention from the, yeah. Right on. That's great. Okay, so last but not least is Julia. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is part of what you brought up, your experience teaching art appreciation at St. Edward's. You can chime in on anything you want. Your work at UT, teaching creative technology, that your students, and this is something we've talked a little bit about when we go for a walk, that your students come from really diverse backgrounds without a lot of art experience. Also, how you cultivate their creativity and thinking outside of the box in an applied, not rarefied profession, as you say, putting them in the pipeline. I myself, I've had a lot of teaching experience, but I taught in private art schools. I taught at the San Francisco Art Institute, at the Kansas City Art Institute, at Mills College. So they were all people who were getting their master's degree or about, and it is a little bit, I had a lot of passion about it, but it is a little bit of a pipeline. And this is a very different take where you also are working with kids that don't have a huge background, so you have a lot of observations about that. And let's see. Oh, and then also some of your interesting projects, because you told me some, which are pretty cool. And then also I had a curious question, and whether or not you find it interesting, but how your students respond to having a teacher who's a practicing interdisciplinary artist with a robust career, and that overlay, you know, of that kind of encounter of somebody who comes from possibly rural. I think that you've had kids from rural areas, right? And then some of the nice surprises of interdisciplinary study, which is that could be a whole nother talk show. This is the things, all these things could be a whole nother talk show. Ask Kevin. And then the an unexpected linkage in pedagogy, which is basically what you guys do, you know. And like, for instance, you taught this course, you co-taught it with Carla Ganis. It was between NYU and UT. And it was using humor and absurdity to foster unsubscribed thought about deeper issues. And I'm going to shut up soon, but I'm going to flip to this because my brain just went there.
You've asked me so many questions.
I know. I don't think I answered all the questions you asked.
I
That's
think we need
okay,
to
just
stop
pick
this.
one.
Feel
Pick
free.
one. But I mean, the thing is that I think you all guys share is that you develop multiple skills within one movement. You know, you have an integrated curriculum. There's, you know, combining, and I actually took this from your copy, of combining conceptual and critical thinking with collaboration, it's what you do as well, a cogency in professional practices, relative historical and current developments, all these things, and overall harnessing one's imagination. So you can just pick one, or whatever you like the best.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite a list. Well, first of all, if you ask a question from the audience, you may end up here, so just keep that in mind.
Precisely.
So I've been teaching in Austin for, I don't know, like 7 years now in higher education. And I started with St. Edward's, teaching art and appreciation class. And the students there most of them did not have any didn't have any experience going to museums, to galleries, very little experience with art. So it was really great to be kind of introducing students to what I think art is, and to understand that it's not a painting of, 17th century on the wall in a museum. This is what art is. There are so many other things. And bringing students to see the exhibition, having visiting artists. Even before Zoom, I would have them, join from other places. So that was really great. And I had a few students who became collectors in Austin. That's what I meant, but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
People who've never been to galleries before, all of a sudden at the end would come in and be so happy that they bought an artwork by a living artist. And to me, that was amazing. Not that, I expect everybody to be collectors, but and also like making work and expressing themselves. So that was quite exciting. And now I teach at the Department of Art and Entertainment Technologies, and we prepare students to then have careers in gaming, in live events, visualization, immersive installation, all kinds of things. And a lot of students at the university in my department are first-generation students. And a lot of them do come from rural areas, a lot of Texans, a lot of, so it's, again, I teach different classes, but one of them, for example, is a drawing class, where, variety of students, some of them have been drawing for some time, and really enjoy doing it. Some of them maybe had drawing in the first 3 years of their elementary school, and that was that. And I really try to cultivate this interest in the drawing as a self-expression, then having, again, go to different gallery spaces on campus. Some people don't even know what we have on campus. Blanton is on campus. So, you know, and having visiting artists, which is very inspiring, you know, for them to hear all kinds of, you know, from all kinds of artists. And what else do we do? So, you know, the other class that you mentioned on humor and storytelling, and that is something that actually came from my practice. Well, all my classes come from my practice, honestly. Right. And I know that when classes come from my practice, I'm a better teacher and I have much better response than if, you know, I'm given a class where I have no idea, you know, and I have to start from scratch, which is, you know, important also to be learning, and I learn a lot. But anyway, so lately the classes I've been teaching very much relate to what I do. And the class on humor and storytelling came from the South by Southwest panel that I created and moderated, and one of my panelists was a close friend of mine, Carla Ganis, whose work, similar to mine, deals with absurdity, humor, trauma, you know, all kind of issues. Different, but there are a lot of overlaps. And we decided to run a class together because, you know, one upside of COVID is that nobody is afraid of Zoom anymore. And so you can actually have classes where you can have a class at the same time in different parts of anywhere, really. And she was in New York, I was here, and so we ran this class. And that was great for students who are in New York to see what are the issues that students in Austin are dealing with, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's great.
And she was in engineering, still is in engineering school, and her students were masters. And so they were, you know, dealing with these things. And then, you know, we have students in Texas, and just that alone to see, you know, what people are thinking about. So what other questions did you ask me?
Oh God, I gotta go back. Really quick. I'm supposed to memorize this
And
stuff.
I guess, you know, I'll say, like, you know, because the question you asked,
Oh,
what
there it
got
is.
people into what they're doing and what got me into teaching.
Yeah.
Was I had a show at the Diva Art Fair in New York, which, you know, doesn't exist anymore. Diva Art Fair in New York exists, but and I had a dean from my undergrad school. I went to school at SUNY Purchase, and the dean brought the students to show, you know, this is what the graduate from the school is doing. And it was this inspiration to the students who are now doing their bachelor's, you know, what they can be. And I remember, you know, like talking to them and, you know, doing this presentation of my work. And I really felt like I wanted to do more of that. And that actually made me consider going to get a master's so I can teach. So that was my path into teaching.
Yeah, that's great.
I remember the question about students responding to me being an artist.
That also leads into, you know, something that I also talked about, and you touched on it a little bit, which I think is a great thing to put into this conversation as well. As a practicing artist who teaches, you know, how you bring your work. Like I remember when I had a student that called me out. We were doing a crit, and she goes, "Oh, that's just Sono's bias." But you know, but how you bring your own self to it, you know, and how it influences. And also, the other thought that crossed my mind, I think this is addressed to all of us, and I know a lot of people in this room, is that the importance of developing curriculum, that it is actually an art in and of itself. It's a worldview. You know, curriculum is, in fact, you know, intellectual property. But you're, you know, you have design experience, all these kinds of things. So you're mining all these different parts of yourself to be responsive to these kids. So how your practice as an artist interrelates with your practice as a teacher, and that the kids witness that, you know, it's grounded.
Yeah, I mean, the classes that I teach now, I create myself. So I create the topic. And, one of the classes, for example, I teach creating moving image in public spaces. And the place that students creating moving image for is Gensler Lobby, which is an architecture firm here in Austin. Not just in Austin, it's global. They came to me asking to help them curate content for the screen that was installed in the lobby. And I said, well, why don't we teach a class together, actually having students create content for the lobby. And so I collaborate with Gensler in teaching the class where students are having this, first-hand experience of working with the client, creating work for the client.
Yeah.
And that, basically was possible because I do moving image, I do animations, and so they came to me for that. So I think that's pretty much the upside of being a working artist, is that what I do, I bring into the classrooms.
Yeah. Yeah, they get to see it.
Yeah. And, they get to benefit
Yeah.
from things that I do.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, I think so.
I think this is a good place to pause and open it up a little bit. Does anybody have anything they want to ask or interject? Sure.
I mean, one of the things we're talking about is like pulling kids and students into the art world. And I've always thought that in the future that the art world will come to you. That art will be every day and free and available, that it won't be rarefied objects on museum walls, that it will be everywhere. And part of that is because I look at the power of art. It has this emotion and it holds you, and it holds you longer than anything, and it pulls you in a way that words and other things don't. So how do you feel about that? Do you think that there's this future where art starts to be more pervasive?
Well, if I can
Yes.
speak to
Yeah.
that.
It's a contrary view. You understand? It's like, we don't have to train people to understand art. It's that art will come to you.
Yeah, so I believe that we don't necessarily have to train people to understand art, but we do have to teach them the skills of what goes into making interpretations and expressing your understanding and things like that.
That's fair.
So the CLI team with AISD, which is run by Sloan McLean, right here in the audience, the district, AISD, and MINDPOP partner together, and we're actually in over 90 campuses. 50,000 students get art experiences that either come to their classrooms in their campuses or that they are able to go experience. And then they also get the skills that you need to be able to understand art through those creative teaching strategies that we train teachers in. So those strategies are research-based, and they are drawn from the arts, and they're created in conjunction with art form experts. So the idea of art being free and coming to you, as Yulia said, we're working on it. Nothing is ever truly free, but as of right now, we do have $3 per student for every campus every year that they're able to use for those art experiences. Back in 2012, the average number of art experiences that students had was less than one, and now it has grown to 4 per student per year. We have doubled the number of arts partnerships that we have across the community from 2014 to 2018, and then they doubled again from 2018 to 2020, and now we're in 2023. So just imagine the growth that we are cultivating and that we are trying to incorporate across the community. So I agree with you. We do want art to be able to come to the people, but it's twofold, because when the art comes, what do the students do? And that's kind of where we are. And yeah.
Yeah, there needs to be a sense of familiarity. You know,
Right.
I remember talking to my kids. It's one of my. I also really enjoyed. I was teaching at UGA, which was similar. I had, several kids in class where they were the first kids in, to go to college, you know, and I talked about this where I was showing them different stuff, and I said, you know, it's, in terms of their intimidation, I said, first of all, these people put their pants on one leg at a time. They were human beings, you know, so what you're looking at in a book is like, you know, that they're just as vulnerable as everybody else, but there's an aspect of just how you learn how to read, or how, you know, something becomes familiar, so when you walk in a museum, it's not that big of a deal. You know, you start to learn a certain language. It's like anything else. And to me, it's basically building familiarity and also just kind of understanding all the different aspects of it, which is also what you do as well, where it's firing on all pistons. It's not this linear way of teaching where you're supposed to memorize this and get back here and pass the test. It's you got all kinds of things going on where kids are thinking in all different kinds of ways. And then we also all know that, you know, one of the joys of teaching is that you sneak up on them. Yeah. You know, so they think it's their idea. And when they think it's their idea, you know, your work is done here, you know. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind that. You know, you're sneaking around. But that's part of what it is it just becomes ingrained. It becomes part of the molecular thing. And I think one of the things that's lacking, and going back to my ma, who was, you know, the art lady, hippie activist in the 60s and 70s, was that when it is ingrained as people, and goes into one of my next questions, when it is ingrained, it just becomes natural. It's not an issue. And this dovetails into all kinds of other issues that we talk about, like that even Chris talked about when we were talking about collecting and being intimidated. It was like, you know, artists are special. And I'm like, no, we're not. I mean, we have the same, you know, things that everybody else does in terms of our careers, our challenges. It's not that big of a deal. So anyway, yeah.
And to add on to that, a lot of our programming, and I'm sure some of what you're doing too, is the art coming to the students in the classroom. Like, we are going into their schools, into their classrooms with Seeing Special Things, with CLI, not just into their art classroom in that delineated period, but into their homerooms. And you know, one time I was on a pre-visit and a student was showing me his library books that he needed to return, and they're all Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and he's got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle backpack and the tennis shoes. And I was like, well, do you know where their names come from? No. And so I explained it to him, and he just lit up. He's like, I'm going to go home and tell my dad all of this. So the art is coming to them in that way too.
Yeah. Sort of a direct relevance.
It's important to have exposure, you know, the more exposure to things. Otherwise, you know, I see my kids, I have 12-year-olds, you know, there's so much is now on the screen, you know, and then, you know, all things start looking very similar, and, you know, you want to have broader view. And so sometimes you also need to step out, right, from like where you are to get more.
Absolutely. We'll start with you.
Thank you.
Alyssa.
So just to go off of what Lori was saying, was something I was thinking about listening to you guys talk too about, you were talking about more art in the everyday and having it be more accessible. I'm wondering, especially for you guys working in the elementary school level, one of the things that always struck me as so odd is that music and art are electives, right? and they're sort of devalued to that part where they're secondary to math and science and history and social studies, right? So is there ever any discussion about sort of, you know, making the playing field more even in that way? Because I feel like it's good to incorporate art into those, but when you were saying like when the kids need tutoring, they have to sacrifice those classes. So marginalizing those subjects, you know, it's no wonder that as artists or musicians, we are marginalized as adults, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I personally use much more music and art than I do chemistry or social studies or calculus, all things I took for years in school. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that there could be more respect imbued in those arenas, starting with primary schools, so that they don't have to be incorporated, that they don't have to be those, you know, that those skills are considered primary importance, you know, like.
That it is
Um,
core.
Yeah, and they become more core. I don't know, is that something you see as possible, or, you know?
It is definitely possible. That's kind of the goal of the Creative Learning Initiative. And I do understand your point of not necessarily, like, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to integrate music and art and theater into core classrooms because every student would be able to get that in those classes. But we don't live in that perfect world.
Yeah.
So being able to integrate it into the classes that they have to take, which are math, reading, science, and social studies, that's kind of where the whole idea of sneaking it in. We're able to take the cognitive lift that is necessary for that core content and make it just a little bit lighter for students. Not lighter in the sense that they're doing less, but they don't necessarily have the fears that come with, oh, I have to go to math. Math is the class that I don't feel confident in. I have to go to
Right.
math twice. And so when they go to their classrooms, they're actually eager and excited to learn that content because instead of paper, pencil, or screen, they're learning by creating statues with their body or by talking about a piece of art and attaching what they see in this image to what it means to divide. Like, have you ever thought about, if you're looking at us up here, how would you connect us to division? And that's kind of just something that is not always respected, as you said, but I think that the respect level for the arts kind of starts with the community. And once we kind of make it the loudest expectation that we have for our kids in education and just in general, then the respect will grow and the people who get to make the actual decisions will listen to the
Yeah.
loudest thing that is being said. So.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if like art was on the same par as science in school, then would artists then get respected and maybe paid like scientists?
If it were,
Or, you know what I mean? It's like
Right.
artists are the same as musicians. And that's what I'm saying is the reverberation of this into our adult lives could be amazing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So to try and incorporate some of these things at a very tiny level, at a, you know, primary education level, I don't know, could really change the world in a much bigger way.
Well,
Yeah, we agree.
to answer to that, when you go to Europe, which, there is very different, or I grew up in Soviet Union, the art was part of education. So when you go there, artists are treated very differently. The artists, musicians, and professors, looked at very differently than here in the States. And that's because art is, and music and creative is very much part of education from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's a must. And it's accessible. And we were talking about how, maybe in affluent places, students have access to music and art. And then in the poor communities, there's, also access because there's philanthropy. But then the middle classes where it's all lacking completely. I think you were talking about that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And just to add, I've thought about that a lot myself as well, and I've found a lot of insight when looking at the history of art education within the United States, especially. Art education was first introduced as a public school topic. I believe it's one of the first, if not the first examples, was in the 1800s in Massachusetts. It's called the Massachusetts Drawing Act. And the reason and motivation behind that was for preparation of the World's Fair being hosted. So they wanted students to be able to have output of being able to do very accurate mechanical drawings of blueprints and things like that to put on display. So looking at kind of the whole history of art education within the United States, decade by decade, there's this pattern that kind of emerges of different outside motivations and forces influencing why certain entities might be giving lots of money to art education at different periods of times. And those come and go in fashion the same way that trends in education and curriculum also come and go with fashion. So, you know, I personally think that there's something to hitching art's wagon to a certain in vogue topic, or to, you know, test scores that are going to help with a different subject that maybe is not doing us as much of a service as we would like it to, because then we're constantly trying to keep up with what is the next motivation, where is the next funding coming from, versus, yeah, that sense of like art is a core subject, and the arts are a core subject, alongside and at the same level as the other core subjects.
Right.
And in order for it to be core, you said that outside of the states, it's mandatory. Like it's just a necessity. That is the norm. And so we're kind of on the ground level of making that the norm for us. We have to demand it. And if we're not demanding it, then nothing's going to change.
Yep. This is why I love you guys, and I'm glad you're here talking. It's like Alex, you've been holding up your hand, and then you've been holding up your hand. So.
Well, I was kind of, so I have kids Yulia's age, Yulia's children's age as well, and I think it's really interesting seeing how art has been part of their lived experience through elementary school and now middle school, and then living in a household with an artist.
Right.
But then also thinking about the same thing, like I teach these art appreciation classes early in my career, and you're right, you would have all these students who have no idea how to look at art, even though I know that they've had the same language since like early, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think about what you were talking about with when is it going to come to, like art should come to the people or whatever. Right. But it's an interesting thing because I think it goes back to what we value. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, in public education, we're like, I teach in the university level, so I don't have the background, and you two will. But, you know, we put so much effort in restraint and tracking on like basic reading and mathematics and things like that, and then but we don't, and we do all this emotional work with cell teaching and things like that, social emotional learning, but it's like we're still missing that central section that connects all of them, because once you get into a classroom, when you're looking at contemporary art uses mathematics and engineering and all these things, and emotional outlook, and you have to have a lived experience in order to be able to interpret it, right? It's different. And so it's like, it's frustrating, because I don't ever think it's gonna be that art comes to the people per se, but like that we want it to just be just a part. I feel like we know this though because of the way that we experienced COVID, and like how many of us like ran through every series or every film, and then there was like a lull, and then things weren't being made, you know, or even like the writer's strike that we've had the last year. It's like, how are we producing content? We do value it, but it lives in a different space, and I don't know how to shift that language. And I think like what you guys are doing is, like, I didn't realize it was that in depth. That's amazing. But at the same time, the middle level, like I think that's a really good point. The middle level is like the average family doesn't have the bandwidth for that, whatever that means. And I don't know how to change that.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a question, but.
That's okay. Glenn will do you next, but let's do Tyler.
So one of the things that you guys, all of you have talked about to some degree or another, and a lot of you have brought up in the audience, is scarcity, right? There's only so much people power, there's only so much money, there's only so much time. So my question for y'all is, when y'all are looking at where you are now and where you want to be, what is more important, or what do you value, or what do you pursue? Is it expansion of audience, or is it increase in depth? Or what levers can you pull in that conversation or in that experience? Or what are some levers that we could all pull and assist you in all of that?
Great question. I was going to ask that question. You stole my question. But no, great question.
I could start, yeah. For seeing special things, I definitely think about that program as emphasizing depth over breadth. And the reasoning for that is based on certain constraints that we have as an institution. So I kind of have, an excuse a little bit in a way to justify the reasons behind us having 6, so we typically serve 6 campuses on average per year, and we serve the entire grade level at the school. And when people learn about the program, they're always wanting to know, how can we expand this? There's a lot of wonderful programs in cities that do serve the entire 5th grade of a certain school district or something. So for our particular situation, our campuses are smaller. One is downtown on Congress Avenue, one is on a peninsula in Lake Austin, and so getting school buses in and out is its own, challenge to problem solve. And then, there's of course so many different factors that go into your capacity to provide programming. So I am able to look at those parameters and say, okay, what is the largest impact I can have with the constraints that are out of my control? And in that case, it is much more about serving a smaller community much more deeply over a longer period of time and investing a majority of resources in that. Now, were some of those constraints to change, I would be challenged to really rethink, and I am always rethinking and reassessing at the end of every school year and over the summer, am I doing the most with what I have? So, yeah.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned time, and everything we're talking about today is a huge change. And change of that magnitude, especially in an entity as big as public education, is going to take time. So, one, we need patience with people who make decisions and people who are expecting results, because in order for what we want to happen to reach the level of where we feel like we have reached full success, which is you never can reach full success because you should always be pushing it higher. But we have to make it known. So for y'all, if you are interested in what we're doing and you want it to grow, then if you have kids in schools, talk to the principal, talk to the superintendent, talk to the school board, and let them know that I am aware that funding is attached to attendance. Enrollment means money for schools. So if you want me to keep sending my kid to your school, then I expect them to have arts experiences. I expect them to be able to learn in creative ways in all of their classes. And if enough parents and all of their friends are saying that, then they're going to be like, man, we're hearing this everywhere. Parents are getting a little upset. We don't want upset parents. So what are we going to do? We're going to figure out how to bring arts into these classrooms. And you can also, on the school level, join the PTA and join the community advocacy committee, because what those do, they are the ones who are having the conversations around the school budget. What are we going to spend this money on? They are also the ones who are having conversations around scheduling. So the number of minutes that students get for every type of art form or for math or reading or science, those conversations are happening at schools, but they're happening with such a small group because the people who really have the power, the community and the parents, aren't in those meetings. Not because they can't be, but just because they aren't. So take a step towards letting it be known. And then if you're an artist, you can link up with me and MINDPOP because we can help you you can help us help you get your work out there, and then you can be involved in schools. You can work with us and help us train teachers. We can increase your visibility, and then it kind of just succincts everything together.
Yeah, you bring artists in it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Julie, do you have a response?
Well, I mean, I'm in a different situation here because,
Mhm.
I'm only one person. I can only teach so many classes, and my classes have caps. But, I try to get I think for me it's going in depth maybe with all students, right? So, reaching them through the classes that I teach, and making that impact, rather than, I cannot increase the number of students,
But it does spread.
Yes.
If you turn somebody on, if you really...
No, absolutely.
You know.
And also if I turn something inside of the students, so a lot of them, they really, they ignite the artist and then they continue.
Right, exactly.
So, and that's what I would like to see in my students, is that, that they continue, not, they start in the class and then they just go on.
They go on, yeah.
And so they go deeper themselves, inside themselves. So.
Yeah, it goes on, it's, I was thinking about this, I've been thinking about this a lot, getting ready for this. I feel you, Jill. It is like, we're going to go to Sloan first and then you.
This question follows.
Oh.
Because let me ask you, so you as a little kid went to an art school, like really, really young, and through your school years. And, we're talking from the other side. Can you remember being a kid, what that was like?
Oh,
and do you
I
have
loved
any memory or any understanding of how hard it is to create one of those schools? You went to the Bemis School in Colorado. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes.
Basically, my mom just felt that, arts education was inadequate. And I brought her up before, and it's also all around everything that we've been talking about, that it becomes normalized, it becomes natural, it just becomes a part of who we are. So she supplemented the best way she could, and there was this little tiny school. It was a little tiny white house in the back of CC, which is Colorado College. They have still a very outstanding dance department they have for years. There was one teacher, 2 cats, and we kept our paints in the bathtub.
How do you think that affected you?
Well, my mom didn't send me to school to turn me into an artist, but she went just because she felt every kid needed to have that. We also took dance classes, we took music classes, we took drama classes, blah, blah, blah. I just fell in love with it. And my dad was in the military, so he was stationed in Paris in 66, 67. We didn't, so I was not in the Bemis Art School at that point, but so she hooked me up with an old guy, an old French painter, and I just remember walking into his studio and the smell of the paint and just all of it. I was just like, I am so here. But a lot of it was just magical. I loved my teachers, So the Bemis Art School, it went on and on and on, and now it's an award-winning school. And there have been people who are, pretty top-rate professionals from New York and everything else who've been directors who are in the art world. But it was just mentorship, which is one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys, which is related to why you love what you do, but how we feel about mentoring, which is a little different than teaching. Teaching has a little bit more of, and I know, Sloan, you're next, because I know you have a lot to say about this, but in my mind when I was teaching, it was more about not being over my kids, but being with them. And I think I was just so inspired by my teachers. I mean, I was 5 years old, and I had this kick-ass ceramics teacher named Miss Owens. She ran the art school. And she's like, we're not making ashtrays. You're actually I'm not a babysitter. You're going to sit down. You're going to paint now. And I'm like, okay. That's like, she was just such a badass, and I just loved her. And just the smells of it, and it became my safe, happy place. So that was my personal dialogue. But I also think that kids who get this in this background don't necessarily go on to be artists, but I think that they bring those skills with them in any number of ways, because it is, as we're saying, it teaches you critical thought. It teaches you creativity. It teaches you collaboration. It teaches you, as you brought up, Alex, emotional intelligence. It teaches you visual intelligence. My mom, she loved it. She hung out with artists, but she taught physics. And we used to have these long talks about, the interconnection, and I'm not going to go down there too deep, but, of science, and, math is music, right? So all this stuff. So does that answer? That's the question. But yeah, I just loved it. I love Miss Owens, I just loved her. So that was what it was. You kind of fall in love, which I think is part of what it is. And she just, I had a student once, we were talking about different stuff, and he goes, yeah, we were talking about Dr. Seuss, and he's like, yeah, you got to get them when they're young, so you got to get, and it's like, and that's just what happened to me. I just feel like I was a lucky kid that in a military town, there was this, amazing art school associated with the Colorado College. But I want to turn to you because you've had your hand up a bit. Do you remember what you wanted to say?
There's so many things going through my brain right now. I also went to an arts high school, Booker T in Dallas, Arts Magnet, and it was completely transformative. So I coordinate the Creative Learning Initiative in Austin ISD, and I've been with the Creative Learning Initiative since 2012. And I will say in the beginning, as a classroom teacher piloting these creative teaching strategies, using drama to teach science and math and reading and writing and social studies, visual arts the same, dance, using all the different art forms. I never in my wildest dreams as an AISD teacher, and at that point I was maybe 8 years teaching, I've been with AISD for 20 years, I never imagined that the Creative Learning Initiative would have this kind of scope and impact and presence in the community and the culture of Austin ISD schools. I mean, no way. But we are now in 97 schools. There's over 200 arts partnerships associated with this initiative, from the contemporary to UT Austin Drama for Schools to individual artists around the city. And we're in partnership with the city of Austin, and of course MINDPOP is our managing backbone partner that we're, Jackson and I are hip to hip as we make these decisions about the Creative Learning Initiative. And I think one thing that I've just been pondering when we're talking about why isn't the arts, core, as ELA and STEM classes are, for example. And what can we do about that? And I just wanted to share and echo what Mikaela was saying about advocating for the Creative Learning Initiative in Austin ISD, because when yesterday we trained about 600 teachers in Austin ISD, all the teachers in the Northeast vertical team, all the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And looking at the survey results, about 98% of those teachers said that the creative teaching strategies are effective tools to use immediately in their classrooms. 97% of those teachers said that these are tools that will engage my students. 96.1% of those teachers said that we increase their instructional toolkit. So these are really well received strategies. What we do as a Creative Learning Initiative team is we present to principals, to admin, and teachers that the arts are absolutely essential, like the core academic subjects. We praise the arts teachers in these spaces. We have everyone give them a round of applause and give them the props that they deserve, and the incredible rigorous experiences that they bring kids every day, just like all the other classroom teachers. And then we talk to the administrators about how they can communicate this not only internally, but with the families. Communication about the value of the arts and creative learning is a part of the Creative Learning Initiative. It's a part of creating that arts-rich campus. I think one thing that we fight against, and another place where we must advocate, is with the legislature. We don't have the funding, as we all know. I was talking to a principal yesterday at Webb Middle School. He's been very public about this recently on KUT, that when they have funding cuts, they have to decide between a math teacher and an art teacher. And right now we are giving so much money away that we don't have the funding to fund all teachers, and there's state standards that we're trying to meet and we're squeaking by, right? And I think in association with that is standardized testing. And in my experience as an educator in Austin ISD and internationally as well, the standardized testing has really impacted our kids that think there is one right answer. And one thing that we are fighting against constantly, even when the school district is advocating for this initiative and principals are allowing, inviting, welcoming the Creative Learning Initiative to provide all of their teachers this professional development using the art strategies to teach their subjects. And we teach the arts teachers as well to use the art strategies to teach their subjects. You know, music teachers using visual art strategies to teach music, for example. That it is, this is a risky place as a teacher. You're going to ask kids a question, and there's going to be multiple right answers, and they live in a world where they're used to like yes, no, black, white, divisive, binary thinking, and so the space that we are as a community as a whole, in Texas, but certainly in Austin, living in is bringing kids the possibility in classrooms of debating ideas and sharing different perspectives and backing up their thinking with that evidence that is rooted in the text and is rooted in the science experiment and is rooted in the math problem solving, has yes, no, this is a problem, this is a math answer that's right or wrong, right? They have to root it in the facts, their answers, but that is a hard space to fight against. I mean, teachers are really like, it is a challenge. I have to Mikaela's point, we have to teach kids how to, all the things we know. We have to teach kids these, how to have a respectful conversation when we look at a piece of art and we see something different. Why is that? We're all different. We all bring this different perspective.
Exactly.
And if we're looking at a piece of art and we're saying, how does this represent the math problem solving we just did today, and why, we have to be able to teach them how to have these conversations about listening, and speaking and sharing in ways that are uncomfortable for them. And that's a whole other skill set for teachers to learn. So it's a bit of a rambling, but I guess the last thing I just wanted to share also that we're advocating for, and I think we can all advocate for, is that, in the school district, priority 1B from the school board is that we are increasing the learning outcomes for our emergent language learners. And we have to do that through teaching them through all language domains. So that's reading, writing, speaking, listening, and what we are also saying is arts. Arts is a language. We must teach them to express themselves through that language and give them spaces. We must represent the curriculum through arts. We must allow them to express their understanding of the curriculum through the arts. And that is something that I think is slowly but surely gaining some momentum. We work really hard as a MINDPOP and AISD CLI team with actually now 15 different departments in the school district are learning these creative teaching strategies. So the special education department, the social emotional learning department, cultural proficiency and inclusivity department, the multilingual department, STEM department, humanities department, like every major department in AISD is learning how to use the arts to deliver their curriculum. Even the people in charge of the district improvement plan, who are at the very, very top working with the superintendent and the chief of teaching and learning, are using creative teaching strategies to facilitate conversations about what needs to happen in Austin ISD. So it is a very systems change, to Mikaela's point. It takes forever, but we are at year 11 of the Creative Learning Initiative, and we are really rooting, seeping in. We have been, but it's more and more momentum, and everyone's voices and advocacy to continue this work is really what we need.
Yeah, and to that point, we have to infiltrate learning at the systems level. And we are accomplishing that when we think about the system of AISD. But the system is bigger than AISD. We have the system of all of our neighboring districts as well. We have the system of Texas and TEA. And then we have the system of federal the laws against or for whatever education. And so when you think about what can you do or what do we have to do or how difficult is it to create one of those schools, we have to infiltrate at the system top, which is not just us, it's not just the teacher, it's not just the classroom, it's, like you had mentioned, legislative. So you have to think big and we have to start small, so.
Kevin, you had your hand up.
Just to bring you.
Part of my question was answered by you, and I think that the answer is really good and positive, and it's something that I'm happy to hear. But I keep thinking about just my experience running a gallery and seeing adults walk into the gallery and wanting, you know,
thanks for
to
bringing us in.
be able to look at artwork
Yes.
and have an answer for it, and to be able to decipher what the artist is talking about immediately without having any other background is just unrealistic. And to know that you're starting with critical thinking and care so much about critical thinking is exciting. And I guess I'm like also curious, like, what are some examples of ways that you're teaching critical thinking in the classroom?
Great question.
You want me to answer? You want to answer?
Who wants to go first?
Well, creative teaching is rooted in 6 essential elements. So no matter what the strategy is that they're learning, whether it be music-based, visual arts-based, theater-based, we are going to, we like to say the word invite. I like to say warm demand, because you will do this. Thinking from like my teacher mind. But we're gonna ask you to generate ideas, and we're gonna ask you to turn those ideas into conceptual models. And then while we're doing that, we're gonna have you analyze, why did you make that creative choice? And then synthesize and put it together with all the other creative choices that are being made in the classroom from our peers. And because our peers are making these observations, we need to respect those interpretations and allow for these perspectives to be contributed at an equal level. So we're going to ask them to contribute their perspective and to base all of that understanding in previous learning, but also in their personal lived experience. So then when they go into these galleries and they see this piece of art, they first interpret it for themselves and determine what it is that they're thinking, and then they're able to actively listen and actively engage with people around them to experience even more of what they're understanding. Did that answer your question?
It does, and one thing that I noticed between the difference between music and art, for instance, is music is pervasive. The way that, you know, somebody mentioned over here, it's free, it's everywhere all the time, everybody's comfortable with it. Nobody has to say, well, I don't know anything about music, the way people say, I don't know anything about art. And one of the things that I just think is important to teach people from a young age is that you can leave a situation not knowing the answer.
Right. Right.
Really great.
You can. And you can also leave a situation understanding that there are more ways to interpret that than just the one way that might have been shared.
Or that what you've taken away is not necessarily what the artist intended, and that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And you might
great.
never know the actual intention. That's one thing that we stress, is we're never going to try to guess what the artist or the creator was thinking when they made it. We're just going to analyze how it makes us feel and how it attaches to our understanding in regards to whatever the content is that we're connecting it to.
Yeah, so to connect those two ideas, one thing that we are really stressing, and especially with the principals as they're looking at these creative teaching strategies in action, is, you know, when Mikaela stands up and creates a frozen statue with her body, or she takes a piece of aluminum foil and creates a model in 2 minutes to represent the theme of a text, that it's actually the class's responsibility to describe that model and then to think about how that model represents that theme, and to think about how that theme connects to their lives, and to think about how their own model is similar or different to this other model, and what might that say about the theme and about who we are as a classroom community before we ever get Mikaela's interpretation, if we even ask her. So it's really about students creating something, the class interpreting each other's things in context, critically to what the curriculum, you know, the learning goal is, and then inviting the artist to share if they want to. And sometimes the artist does, and sometimes the artist doesn't. And we do call students artists in the classroom and model that as well, so that we really bring in those multiple perspectives and foster that kind of critical thinking and perspective sharing.
That's great. Do you have a comment, Yulia, on this?
Well, it just actually reminded me of art appreciation class, how there was the students were asked not to come up with, whether they like something or they dislike something. They had to analyze and think about it and collectively discuss, and then, process it and relate it to their experiences, and then at the end to come up with, how it is that they, experience to understand this work. So it's sort of like the delayed reaction. You know, and in the classroom, in some way, you know, what you were talking about, you know, through collaboration, through critiques, you know, all these things are being explored on the university level, for sure.
So it's reinforced. You know, when we had our Zoom talk, there was the other thing that was on my mind was, you know, we're starting with K through 12 Doherty, even, you know, they start with 2, you know, working up through college, but and also what you guys do in terms of tracking and constant reinforcement. And, you know, the kid that's 9 years old right now that's having these experiences is going to be 16, is going to be in college in 9 years. It's the same person, you know, so it's like, so that was the other thing that crossed my mind, you know.
Listening to you guys talk about these respectful attitudes that you're instilling in the kids, right? On how to form your own opinion, but to listen to others and to, like, you know, compare and discuss and not judge, and there is no one single interpretation. I'm like, can we please bring this to the adults? And it's like, you know,
that's interesting because, like, in the university stuff, you get one semester in the 8 that you, for the average person that's a degree outside of art, right, or outside of the arts, it's one class. That's the requirement. And so it's like we're doing all this like work on the lower levels, and then we get to this university level because you want the adult. Like, I think Yulia's right. Like, we're training an in for the collector, because that kid is going to be a person with means at some point, right? And like learning how to think about what to purchase, because like, but they only get one semester, one 15-week course in all of their 4 years. That's a lot to like put upon that class, to be able to like say that, okay, and now you can go to the museum by yourself as an adult.
Right. But I have to say that, you know, still the fact that there is this class, you know, some places don't even have that. And Lori was in my class. She was a visiting artist once. Great impression of the students. And I actually had one student that I thought slept through my whole class. And then I met her at the airport, and she said, "Your class changed my life." And I'm like, when? But she was telling me that she goes to all these art places, and, you know, she's very interested now, and, you know, travels the world. So I guess even when they're sleeping, they're still processing.
Yeah. So no.
Yeah.
We've had a couple hands up. Jackson, I want to get to you, but I also want to get to Alex.
So
You're
I
next.
wanted to pick up on some of the threads about like the way that art is valued and how we justify art in this particular culture. And it's really interesting, Yulia, hearing you talk about how you had students who went on to be art collectors. And I was curious because now we have MINDPOP and Seeing Special Things both have now histories. And I'm curious, like, if there's data that has come out of this about, because we're so often, if anyone in the room has had to fill out a grant application, it's the same in museums. We have to justify our work. What is the value of our work? How are we contributing to culture? I think we've all kind of justified that in this room. I think we're all like-minded, but like, have you seen that impact with the 40 years of people who've had free, museum memberships, or the way that, maybe a student has done better in math or science because of their arts education and then gone on to have some engagement with the arts, or it's maybe also through that Gensler experience. Like, I'm curious, like, what is the beyond when they leave you, do you have data or insights into how that may have changed people's lives and the way they're taking their next steps and contributing?
Yeah, in terms of Seeing Special Things, it can get tricky with collecting data on minors, given that we're not part of AISD. There's a lot of red tape that would need to be navigated in order to track the identities of those students over time once they leave the program, for very good reason. Like, they are not necessarily electing on their own to be coming to the museum on their field trips. So one of the things that I want to see with the program in terms of assessment and evaluation is that we improve the way that we're tracking those passes that go out at the end of the year. So my hope, and anecdotally I know this, but I don't have data necessarily at this point to demonstrate concretely, is that those passes are going home, and if they don't get crumpled up in a backpack, which we have ways to mitigate that, that those passes are bringing their adult family members back with them to the museum over a longer period of time, and that is data that we can then track. So I know anecdotally it happens because I have students come up and tell me, even in the middle of the program. One of the things that I thought was, again, a super unique experience for the students last year, we had an artist, Claire Rojas, who had a new sculpture that was on view at our sculpture park. It was site specific. It had been created for that space. There was a student that came to that fall visit, and then when I saw them again in the winter when they came to the Jones Center, there were paintings by this artist, Claire Rojas, as well. So the students not only seeing an artist in different environments with different mediums, 2D and 3D, the student, first of all, without me prompting, remembered the name of the artist. This is a period of, at least 8 to 10 weeks that have gone by. And then was talking with me afterwards, like, I brought my aunt to Laguna and we saw the sculpture, and I told her about the conversation that we had there. So, I know, again, from qualitative data, that it is happening, and students are also becoming empowered to bring their adults back with them and extend that knowledge in that way. And yeah, we need more infrastructure and more tools, which goes along with advocacy and funding, to be able to get even more concrete data to help tell the story of the impact that we're seeing happen on the ground.
Yeah. And at the district level, we have seen immense increases in academic outcomes for subpopulation students, which means, like Sloan had mentioned earlier, emergent bilingual students. They are outperforming emergent bilingual students from before, when we weren't having these art integrated activities, and also special education students, students that aren't necessarily identified as a special population, but that we have seen to be on the lower tracks, have been able to move themselves up and become more grade level ready for their upcoming year. We have seen an increase in attendance and in enrollment, which is huge because kids want to come to school now and they want to experience these opportunities. And all of this is happening in classrooms where we have seen these teachers doing these creative teaching strategies, and when they're basing learning in like creativity and in the arts, then it kind of is putting its stamp on every other aspect where they're actually being assessed. So the state test that Sloan was mentioning earlier, the STAR, does not ever ask questions about art or music or dance. Right. But the way that they are assessing students and the way that the questions are being asked, they're able to understand and develop the correct answer or the intended answer based on the test, because of all of this that is happening in their classroom. And again,
They come to it in different ways. They have all these different points of connection.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry.
And most of my experience right now has been in the classroom and on campuses. I'm still kind of fresh to the MINDPOP scene, so the quantitative data, Jackson or Sloan can probably get you that. And then Brent Hasty is our research guru, and so I can get you those numbers. But I do know from the teacher standpoint and the surveys that we do and how they see the increases and how they see the difference in their students and in what it is that they're teaching. And then also just based on readiness levels from when they're in 4th grade, what they accomplished in the beginning of the year to what they accomplished at the end, how successful they are on those standardized tests, and how ready they are for 5th grade. And then that happens with every bridging year. Did you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just specifically that the data shows that teachers using these strategies more frequently in the classroom than other teachers or students receiving instruction through these strategies in comparison to students who are not. The students are scoring better on math and reading STAR, 3rd and 5th grade. And for bilingual emergent bilingual students, it's actually not even the fidelity of the strategies necessarily that is increasing the learning outcome for our emergent language students. It's actually teachers just taking the risk to use the arts to teach. And we know that's because of all the different entry points to learning that can happen through that. The research shows that translating between the linguistic and non-linguistic some symbol systems, translating between symbol systems, according to Marzano's research, is that the learning is 1.7 times more durable. So kids are able to retain what they're learning and apply it on these tests. So we used to have back when there was a Department of Research and Evaluation in Austin ISD, before our previous superintendent, we did have people in research and evaluation who are monitoring all these stats in order to keep us alive. So our data has been very strong, showing the academic outcomes when people are using these creative teaching strategies with fidelity and frequently.
And if you're interested in more research from a museum studies perspective, Crystal Bridges has a study that I want to say came out in 2018 that is interesting to see the retention of students coming to a field trip at the museum looking at historical American art, and then their ability to recall and retain information over a period of time. And then also, interestingly enough, the National Art Education Association came out with a long-term study in, I want to say, 2019 that was looking at, is fairly comprehensive, looking at single visit museum field trips and its impact on test scores and things. And, you know, I hesitate to bring this up because there was a lot of mixed opinions about it. The results were kind of inconclusive about whether or not there's really an impact happening there of a direct correlation between a museum field trip to the art museum and test scores at the end of the school year. You know, that being said, there's a quote in a recent book that came out called, I want to say it's from Oxford Press, and it's called An Uneasy Guest in the Schoolhouse. And the quote that the title comes from says that it doesn't matter how many times the local school goes to the museum down the street, the arts are still and will always be an uneasy guest in the schoolhouse. And that quote was from over 50 years ago. And we're still, you know, talking about it here today. So there's something else that's also happening in those studies like that NAEA did that maybe us as researchers also need to dig deeper into looking at what questions are we missing, what's happening here that's very tangible, clearly, that we need to be asking different questions ourselves. And going to the museum and looking at art teaches us how to ask those kinds of questions. So it's cyclical.
Yeah.
That really, for me, like, you know, these conversations around scarcity and what our schools aren't doing or how can we make it better. I'm thinking about like my first job in 1997 in Minnesota at the advocacy, and we would have all these meetings about how can we convince everybody that the arts are important? How can we convince everybody that the arts are important? And then I just think about 30 years later, we're still having that same stinking conversation. And I think it's the wrong conversation. I just don't think it's the right question. And because I think we all know, I mean, not just we all in this room, but like people, humanity, you go out, we're doing work in Birmingham, Alabama and Huntsville, Alabama, and doing surveys community-wide. Do you think the arts matter in kids' education? Literally no one says no to that question. Nobody. Like, it is a thing that we know. Like, it is not a new shiny penny of education.
Right.
It's not something that I think that we have to, like, overly busy ourselves with the work of just trying to convince people we should exist, and instead busy ourselves with the work of like doing it really well and at scale. And to me, like what was so important to me about the Creative Learning Initiative is that this is in
97, soon to be 126 campuses, and that learning experience that Sloan and Mikaela are describing is happening, and it's happening, you know, with the work you're doing, is happening for so many young people, right? And I mean, I think what you're talking about, Sarah, like the work that is happening at depth, like how great that is that you are there doing that work at depth, and then to know that there are over 200 other organizations and individuals doing work like that in all different kinds of ways for young people. So to me, like, I don't know, this is like this thing bubbling up that I just want to say.
Yeah.
And I think, Mikaela, I was so excited when you were talking about, like, talk to your principals, talk to your teachers.
Yeah.
And then the kind of edgy thing that I want to say is participate in the public school system. Send your kids to public schools.
Yeah.
And we want to, like, wait for them to get creative enough for us. Like, you got to just jump in
Make them creative.
and make them creative and
exactly.
be part of it. So that's what
Exactly.
I think with that, that's really great. I think it's good to not slowly, but to wind down. Now, I would like to return to you guys and do a sweep with you, just if there's anything else that you want to say. We do have more beverages. You're welcome to hang out and stay and talk more. That's part of what this is about. We really want people to meet new people, make new alliances, share ideas, that kinds of things. I think it's one of the things that's important to me as an artist, and this is part of the question that was staged to Yulia as well as a practicing artist who teaches art, is that everything we've been talking about tonight is completely interdependent with what's going on in the art world. You know, like things we can complain about, like Alyssa brought it up, like, you know, we need to actually have those, you know, values as adult artists in the art world, which is true. You know, you're a little person and you just keep going. So it's like how that's fostered along the way that there's this kind of connectivity. I'm going to bring up somebody really quick from Kevin's talk. He did art and technology, and Lisa B. Woods used the word siloed. You know, she said there's a lot of creativity people. There's a lot of people here that are very creative. You know, Austin's really diverse. It's very scrappy, which is one of the things I love about it. But people are still kind of siloed, you know. And it's like, I think it's really important that practicing artists. It was actually Anne Armstrong who told me about seeing special things, you know, because I hadn't heard about it, you know. So it's important to hang out and get to know each other so there's exchanges, because I think that it just strengthens the fabric. So, you know, we can probably talk till 2 or 3 in the morning, like we could, you know, with any one of these talks, which is why I want to return. So please feel free to hang out. But I did want to just do a sweep before we end and just go down the line if there was anything else that you wanted to add, or there's something that came up in the talk tonight that you want to speak to that you haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, I want to add that you're doing great stuff by creating spaces like this so we can talk about it.
Oh, thank you.
So, you know, in fact, bringing everybody together and you know, making this conversation going beyond these walls too. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Do either of you?
Yeah, I just want to add that, like, I am really grateful to be in a position to have a, you know, profession that I'm currently in this really interesting place of both in the world of formal education and informal education, in working with schools and museums. And I want to thank everyone at all of those locations that make this work possible as well. It is absolutely not a one-person job. Right. I have an amazing team in my education department and in the entire institution at the Contemporary Austin, and mentors I've had along the way, as you brought up mentors, that make this work possible. So, yeah.
Yeah, and to echo, this is bigger than one person, so obviously my team and the district, and then all of our arts partners that we have, and hopefully our upcoming arts partners that we have. But I would say the last thing I want to say to you would just be take action and get involved at whatever level that is for you and however that looks. If you yourself don't have a student in public school and you're not able to kind of infiltrate in that way, then tell your friends and make them do it, because everybody knows somebody who can be in the space where this conversation needs to be heard. Right. And once it is heard by enough people, we will start to see an even bigger change than what we already have going in AISD.
Yeah, I have one quick last question. I lied. How do artists, how do people like me and Stella, but not to volunteer anybody, but how do working artists in the Austin scene get involved? Because one of the questions that we've talked about before, we had DIY spaces, things like that, where we have all this talent that's coming out of UT, or there's a lot of artists here that do really, really cutting edge, really vigorous work. They don't just do stuff that's easy to sell, for instance. They do very vigorous work that does fire on all pistons. And we've got quite a few of them in this room, actually, where you are thinking critically, where you're training kids to be able to look at their work and be able to have a response, rather, So how do artists get more involved? Because I know that you include it, you include them in seeing real things. You also bring your kids to places, you've brought your kids to the art gallery for Black Studies. You've brought your kids to the Doherty. You've brought your kids. You bring them out. So do you have any thoughts for how not just parents but artists, or the broader community of the art community? How do we pitch in?
Yeah, a big what MINDPOP does is to leverage local artists and arts organizations. So reach out to MINDPOP and get connected to MINDPOP, because we can help you network not only in the arts community, but in all of the schools that we are already in. We have courses that are specifically specially formed for teaching artists, and ways that we can kind of give you the tools that are needed to be able to extend your reach. We have MINDPOP Matchmaker, which is where schools have access to a online database where they're able to say, I really want my kids to experience this, and they go and search it, and then all of the arts partners and organizations that provide something along that line are able to be seen to the teachers, so then the teachers can reach out directly to you and let their principals and their district know, hey, we have access to this, I have this money, I want to spend it, let's make this happen. So really the first step is you got to let me and my team know that you want to do it. And then when you say I want to do it, be ready to do it, because we're gonna. So, and
we also have convenings of community arts partners, so we bring everyone together to talk about challenges in the field or things people are trying to figure out together. Or a lot of times we'll also do one-on-one consulting with an individual artist or arts organization who's wanting to design programming, and we can use our expertise of what we know, what schools are looking for, what gaps are in the districts, just what makes for a good program the teachers are going to raise their hand for. We can help you out to design that work.
We also can train you to be professional
facilitators. Yeah,
that's
what I was going to say.
Chestnut is absolutely one of our
most
outstanding facilitators in the country. She was facilitating yesterday. I brought principals just to watch her facilitate because she's fantastic. It's been with us for many years, and
let's connect
bringing artists and teachers together to co-facilitate sessions, or just an artist to facilitate the session, is part of the work that we do in order for people to be able to know your organizations better and the work that you do, as well as you share your expertise with teachers so that they can really do these strategies well, with students.
That's great.
I'll lastly add, come teacher workshop at the museum. I love working with contemporary artists to give workshops to teachers who are also teaching artists themselves. A lot of classroom teachers miss that part of their creative practice when they are in the classroom day in and day out, and so don't feel intimidated. And if you are in a position where your work is being shown somewhere in a gallery or museum or where not, ask what kind of programming is happening, how can I get involved in the extension of my work, can I give a teacher workshop. Each teacher that's in that workshop, maybe we only have 8 or 12 teachers, they each see several hundred 100 students in their practice. So the scope of that impact is enormous. And come into the classrooms when you have an opportunity. If there's a chance to do a residency or something. I'll end on another anecdote since we're working with qualitative data here. One of our most recent artists, we called them our guest professional artists, who came in as was teaching the art lab for last year's Seeing Special Things program. We had a mix-up where the bus wasn't going to be able to come and the exhibition was closing and all of the factors, and so one poor grade level was not going to be able to come on their second visit and see the work, and our guest artist was so gracious, Angela Navarez. She's based in Seattle actually now, and her work happened to be on exhibit at the Austin Bergstrom Airport at the time. She came to their classrooms instead, and she brought one of her pieces with her. She put it up in the classroom, and one student goes, "It's an elephant." And she's like, "No, it's a self-portrait." And my face was like, oh no, this may have been a bad idea. And by the time that we left, we had visited 3 classrooms that day, and she said that was her favorite experience of being part of the program for the 12 lessons that she had taught. So don't be intimidated to get into different spaces. Yes, yes.
Let's end there. That's perfect.